Welcome to another edition of Data in the Hallway. I'm Ray Paik, a community manager at PingCAP, and joined by my co-host Daniel on a sunny Friday afternoon in the Netherlands. Good to see you on the bright sunlight, Daniel. Good. Today we're honored to have two guests today, Nikolay Sivko and Peter Zaitsev. Peter is a repeat guest, so we're honored to have you. Nikolay, you're joining us from Turkey. Peter, you're in your, looks like you're in home base in North Carolina. I just saw you at a couple of open source conferences. I know you spend a lot of time on the road, but good that you're safely home. So today we want to talk about a relatively new open source project. I don't know if you want to call a 2-year-old project relatively new, but fairly new project that I was recently introduced to called Coroot. So Nikolay and Peter, I'll let you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Coroot and tell us about when your experience of launching this project like a few years ago. So.
Yeah, okay. I'm Nikolay. I'm CEO and co-founder of Coroot. We built an open source observability platform, and we aim to simplify observability. It means there are a lot of big companies in this space, a lot of open source products, but still troubleshooting can be super complicated, taking into account that complexity of modern systems are getting more and more complex. Systems are getting more and more complex, and sometimes engineers have troubles with understanding telemetry data. And so this our scope, and we want to make troubleshooting easier for any engineers.
Okay, well, let me then talk about my perspective, right? So I am involved in more direct capacity in Coroot relatively recently, just about 3 months. I really liked what Nikolay was doing, and I decided to join the project in my role as a co-founder and investor, kind of using my experience within an open source market to help the project. Now, what excites me with Coroot, right? Or what problem I am seeing, right? Like, well, as you mentioned here, Ray, I'm the database guy, right? A lot of time I spent with the open source databases, right? And here you see like a very interesting thing when it comes to observability, right? If you think about the DBAs and other database experts, we can say, oh, fantastic. We see the problem is with a database, right? And let us go very deep, right, and solve it. In a lot of cases, those DBAs, they like a lot of data. We are capturing 10,000 metrics every second. And you know what? There is a 5,000 graphs. And you know what? Oh my gosh, I am this like, Sherlock Holmes being able to use all this data and resolve a complex problem and find it, right? That is a very gratifying, right? So in these cases, like a complexity is often what they want, right? Now, if you look at the application developer, however, problems are different. First is if you're looking at the application and infrastructure as a whole, it is not always the database. Well, to start with, it's not always the database, right? You can find many applications those days which would use, let's say Postgres and then Elastic and maybe Kafka and Redis, right? And all at the same time, and maybe also like a handful of, various stateful AWS services or something, right? And so for them, the first problem is to find, okay, where is the problem, right? What kind of application it's related to, right? And then we can resolve those problems, right? And this is a thing which Coroot is doing very, very well, right? It's really focusing on working with solutions for, I would say, application developers, which work with large, complicated environments, right? Which can, always help you to identify which component has a problem, right? And then provides you enough insights, enough actionable insights, so you can resolve maybe 95% of a problem, right? We are not trying to replace, like some advanced tools as, PMM, right? There's like PG analyzers, like a bunch of specific tools for database engines which provide more depth, right? In this case, but that also comes with complexity and kind of covering one technology, not everything.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I was about to say, Peter, that you're like, if you just look at your like a LinkedIn profile, you're currently involved in a lot of different ventures, right? And then you have a lot of experience in database space. So yeah, this definitely caught my attention. Like something must have intrigued you to become involved. So thanks for that background. And maybe Nikolay, so what's the original of the word Coroot? Like, how did you like name the project, and what's the origin of that?
So origins that we try to understand. Is it possible to automate troubleshooting? Because current software and current tools offer you like they can help you to gather telemetry data such as log, traces, profiles, metrics, but and to build your own dashboards and alerts. That's it. And I understood that the majority of engineers, while working on troubleshooting some outages, work the same way. They have a set of hypotheses about compute resources, network, runtimes, and so on, and they try to validate them one by one. And we decided to try to automate this analysis, and it works. And I imagine that like someone already analyzed all the telemetry data for you and provided you with some report, and they are like your copilot. It means root means super user in Unix, Linux systems, and Coroot means copilot of an administrator or something like that.
Cool. Nice. Cool. And I think like both of you may have mentioned this. I mean, there are a lot of observability projects out there. I mean, just in like, for example, like CNCF, there are probably like 3 or 4 of them that I can sort of name. I'm not an expert in observability space, but yeah, I think you sort of both describe some of the common challenges that people have in terms of pinpointing what the root causes of the problems are, and although a lot of people love to have more data, but sometimes it becomes almost a curse, right? It sort of becomes very challenging to really figure out what the problems are. But go ahead, Peter. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I want to say here, right, Ray, when you talk about like observability, right, this is kind of a very big space. Right, and I think it's important to understand when something says, "Oh, what there is this observability project," right? Well, it doesn't mean what it's really replace one another, right? I think what you would see, there are a lot of open source projects in the observability space, which are either components, like kind of your Lego pieces. Think about, let's say, Prometheus, fantastic observability project, right? In which, Coroot uses, right? But that is just a component, right? Or open telemetry. Well, again, that's like multiple of the wonderful components, which again, we use in Coroot, but that does not provide you with their full solution, right? Which Coroot is focused about, right? And I think another set of projects you'll find there are also number of rather niche projects, right? And I think that is a very common, right? Because if you look at this case, the people which coming from, the certain, let's say, community, they like observability for that community, right? If you are, I don't know, let's say security engineer, right? You'll say, oh my gosh, I want like more observability for security problems, right? If you are the Postgres guy, well, how we can observe a Postgres better, right? In this case. And I think that takes kind of a different approach, right? And considerable work to say, hey, like our focus is not very kind of focused, not one building block, but provide you complete solution, which is first best at providing you the overview. Right.
All right. Cool. No, I mean, yeah, thanks for that background. Yeah, so I mean, there's a reason why there are a lot of different projects out there. It's not, I mean, they're not all attacking the same problem, but since it's just such a broad space, but yeah, I appreciate that context in the background. And I was looking through some of your blog posts, and I mean, actually impressed with the number of blog posts that you have, Nikolay, like posted on your website. And one of them, I think, was dealing with like, here's how to sort of root cause like issues in like Postgres database, which I found interesting. So for database developers and users, like, can you talk about some of the use cases of Coroot? I mean, you can use that blog post as an example, but I'm sure that there are other areas where database developers or users, what are some of the like interesting use cases for using Coroot?
We are focused on providing a developer who is not focused on observability or reliability to be able to understand what's happening with his system. And that's why we started to look at Postgres performance from an application side, from the application side, like my queries are performing slower than usual. What can explain this behavior? And we try to find the answer by collecting query statistics from Postgres or other databases. But we understand that we don't provide insights into deep Postgres internals like BG writer and so on, because for majority of cases it's not valuable info for developers. Like they possible actions like super limited by creating index or rolling back the application code and so on. So we aim to help them quickly understand what's happening and why, without providing them with some deep expertise into the database.
Yes. Yeah, and I would also want to highlight this, I think, from interest and from an organizational standpoint, right? Because think about this, right? When you have a complicated application, often you would have for these different components, you may even have like a internal, let's say some team, right? You have a DBA expert team or external team, right? You may be, I don't know, let's say the Percona customer, right? Or you may be running, RDS, right? Or TiDB in the cloud, right? So in this case, from developer standpoint, first you need to identify, oh, this is this component which is malfunctioning, and then I can go and work with a partner to kind of resolve that specific help, right? But that is a very valuable insight, because often developers may be kind of lost, right? They have 10 partners differently I could potentially work with, but who exactly is responsible, right? I need to point that out, and better I have evidence, right? Because what often customers say is, well, when you come to someone, right, and maybe you kind of experience that in your kind of normal, life as well, right? You go call someone and say, hey guys, I have a problem, and say, no, that is not our problem, that's somebody else. And you say, oh my gosh, right? Coroot provides you the evidence. So you can say, well, guys, we have evidence your database is not responding to that. Look at that. Your 95 percentile response times are, 10x what they usually, right? And then with Coroot, we also can take an extra step, right, and provide some instrumentation is database specific, right? Like we don't capture everything for Postgres, but we can capture most important metrics, right? Most important data points, so developer can troubleshoot on his level as well, right? And deploy the simple fixes as to add the index, right? To maybe tune some parameters, right? As Nikolay mentioned.
Yeah. So if I look at like observability tools, especially in the enterprise space, like 10, 20 years ago, you would install an agent. There might be an agent for like DB2 and Oracle, but maybe not for MySQL. And nowadays with cloud, it's of course even more difficult, because with RDS, like AWS is not going to allow you to install an agent. So how does Coroot actually get all the information it needs from like either like on-prem systems or cloud?
Coroot provides you with a few agents, like we have Node agent, which collects everything related to Node metrics and containers running on it, including logs and so on. But in some cases, it's not possible to run agent on the node, like in case of using AWS RDS. We provide AWS agent that discovers all RDS instances. It instruments Postgres with our agent that gathers metrics from Postgres instances, and also we use enhanced RDS monitoring to fetch resource metrics, resource usage metrics like CPU, disk I/O, and so on. So, and the most important thing here that we measure database performance from client side. So we instrument applications running on usual regular VMs like EC2 instances, and we capture the queries to RDS, and we can measure latency, we can measure query statuses, and so on. So that's allow us show the big picture to users, like what's happening and how your application feels like database performance.
Yeah. And I think what I would add in this case, I think, Daniel, you are right? Something like your database or something maybe running in the cloud, and you may not have access to details about that, but you usually have access to instrument your application, right? And that is what Coroot heavily relies on. And because we use eBPF, we can do it like after magically. You don't need to install some, custom libraries, right, to modify your application code, right, which I think makes it much easier to use compared to open telemetry, right, which often says, hey guys, you can provide this amazing wealth of information, but you need to spend a lot of time implementing that, which is hard or maybe impossible, right? Because if you especially look at the enterprise, they have a lot of components which are actually proprietary, right? Nobody has an access, to a source code and can modify them, right? And if that instrumentation is enough, right, to point out like where what components external have a problems, right? And then, well, if they're instrumented, we can answer also questions why the problem happens, right? Something else to point out here, I think, which is interesting, is what we are able to discover protocols, right, with Coroot. So we can say, oh, this is something external, but it looks like PostgreSQL instance, right, a MySQL instance to us, right? And that also allows to get some additional level of details which we can extract from a protocol, from a communication.
Cool, awesome. Yeah, I guess another question that I want to ask. I mean, I mentioned that the project's about like 2 years old. I know you have a pretty big milestone coming. I think you're about to have your 1.0 release in a few weeks as we're recording this, which is a huge milestone for any software projects and particularly open source projects. Like, what's your journey been like since like 2022 and in terms of how you evolved your project? And beyond 1.0 launch in late April, like what are sort of your like areas that you want to address in the next couple of quarters in Coroot? I know I ask you a lot of questions, but feel free to like take that in multiple parts. Sorry.
We started from not fully open source version. We initially we open source only our agents, which are Prometheus compatible. And then we decided to open source all the code. And then we was experimenting a lot with eBPF because it was something new technology, and we weren't sure that it's possible to gather all the data we need to analysis. We experimented a lot with building a model of a system using telemetry data. we wanted to build a model to proceed complex audit of the system to highlight the issues. Like we analyze everything, analyze logs, metrics, network communication, network latency, and so on. And finally, we worked hard on simplifying installation. So now you can install Coroot and get insights just in a few minutes after installation. And maybe Peter will tell more about 1.0 milestone.
Yes, yeah. Well, I'll start with this. I think there are a lot of engineers are a very kind of conservative crowd, right? So as I got involved in this, I said, wow, Coroot is so cool, so capable, right? It's really very stable, right? And we still say, well, we are in this kind of development 0.29 something, right? And that like prevents some people from using it, right? We really need to give the Coroot really present that to the ecosystem as it is. That is a very good observability product already, which you can and should try on your production, right? And with version 1.0, we are pretty much making that statement. Right, I think that is fantastic, right? And I think some of that also comes with the use of eBPF technology, right? Because in additionally to being very powerful, that is also technology which is pretty safe, right? We are not requiring you to ingest, some kernel models, right, which potentially can crash your server, right? eBPF technology and some other stuff Coroot is using is very efficient, right? And we expect what if version Y0, right? We will be getting more user feedback, which will help us to navigate, right, what we can deliver next, right? Now, what I would also maybe go back to this like some other problems, right, we want to solve with Coroot, right? So I think we've been talking a lot about simplicity, right? Hey, we want to make troubleshooting simple for application developers, right? And that is, I think, one important core value. Now, if you've seen a lot of systems, right, enough systems, right, in your practice, you know also what a lot of them are actually very poorly instrumented, or they're not consistently instrumented, right? Because it is just very hard to deploy the observability platform, right? As Daniel mentioned, you need to install and configure a whole bunch of different agents, right? And some bits and pieces may not have agents available, and so on and so forth, right? With Coroot, we ensure it's very simple to get everything instrumented, so you do not have a blind spots. Some things may be instrumented deeper than others, but at least you will see all your application infrastructure. You will know which application or the components are not responding well or returning errors, and so on and so forth, right? So that is, I think, is another very important piece which some people don't, pay enough attention to, right? And the third one is cost, right? You may guys have read about this kind of like an article about this, I don't remember how many hundreds of millions or billions dollars of a Datadog bill, right? It's interesting is that what I think observability systems, they are almost become as expensive as a databases, right? Where people used to joke about, oh my gosh, Oracle, right? Like we'll take your last shot. I think that often happens with those major observability solutions as well. And what we hear again, a lot of developers, a lot of startups, right? They have to go with applications which are not properly instrumented, right? Not because technology doesn't exist, but because it's just too expensive, right? And that is what we solve with Coroot as well, right? Because we use Prometheus, we use ClickHouse internally, some of a very efficient data store systems, and we have an open source version. You can self-host and make an instrumentation is very efficient. And even if you choose to use Coroot Cloud, right, the pricing will positively surprise you compared to Datadog and similar systems.
Cool. Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing the journey. And I mean, again, congratulations on 1.0 release. It's a pretty major deal. So congratulations on that milestone. So for like a TiDB community members and other listeners to the podcast, if they want to sort of get started on Coroot, like what are some of the resources that you would point them to? And I'll be happy to include them in the episode description. But what's the easiest way to learn more about the project and get experience actually using the tool hands-on to try things out?
The best starting point is our site, Coroot.com. And the second one is our GitHub repo, Coroot/Coroot. And we guess it should be pretty simple to install Coroot, but if our users have some issues with that, we have our community Slack workspace, and also we respond to any GitHub issue or GitHub discussion.
Yeah, well, one thing I would mention here, right? Like if you're a company which have like a many different environments, maybe using many different technologies, Kubernetes is a great place to start, right? Because you can really install Coroot, right, on your Kubernetes cluster of any size, right, in like in 5 minutes. And it just this kind of instrumentation after magically, right? At least in terms of all their EVF and response time discovery, right? So time to value would be fantastic. And we have so many people say, wow, we installed Coroot and now I'm seeing this service is actually talking to that service. Wow, I didn't know that. Why would it do it, right? And that becomes fantastic, right? Because I think what is often happens also, right, is we have a documentation of what components exist and how we talk to each other, right? But as in anything we maintain manually, it gets out of sync, right? And often developers operate actually with a model of their infrastructure which may be incomplete, right, or outdated, right? And I think that is if you look like for wow factor, that is always one of those things which you don't have to have any kind of problems or failures. Boom, right? In 5 minutes you get like a more insight about how your system actually works than you ever had.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, it's been great to have another open source. I have an episode dedicated to discussing another open source project, which we love. I mean, definitely, I'm sure like the 1.0 launch would go well. Like, congratulations again, and hopefully it goes without a hitch. Anything else that you want to share with our audience about Coroot that we didn't cover, or like, I mean, Daniel, like, hopefully I didn't like cut you off or anything during the discussion if you had any other questions, but.
No, I didn't really have much more questions. I think all the questions I had are already answered.
Right, cool. Nikolay, Peter, anything else that you want to talk about the project or the product?
Well, I would say as a call to action, I would encourage you to check it out. Give us your feedback. As I think it's often happens with open source projects, right? Well, we would or business around open source projects. It's like, hey, you folks, we would love your money, right? But I think at the same time, like in open source space, majority of users are going to be users of a free and open source version. We recognize that and appreciate that. So the next best thing is your feedback, right? We really want you to know what exactly you like, what you don't like. You can, comment on community Slack. We have GitHub issues, right? And also Nikolay and myself are happy to talk to you. Right, I think that is what I know. I always appreciated participating in the early stage product, right? Because that is where often founders are available, right? And they can hear you out and fix your problems, right? Compared to the, massive open source projects, right? And typically you would have to, communicate through multiple layers, right? Before you get to the top.
Cool. All right. Yeah, I definitely second that. I think Peter, you and I already ran cross paths a couple of times this year at various open source conferences, and yeah, I appreciate you making time for a lot of people. So cool. So yeah, the final question. This is our tradition, and Peter, you've already gone through this, so you're sort of exempt from this question. That we ask guests about. Tell us about where they live, and Peter, you told us about interesting facts about Durham, North Carolina last time around. So, Nikolay, I mean, you're in Antalya, Turkey, which I believe is in the southern coast, the place I've never been to. Like, tell us something about Antalya that you like and you find interesting, and our listeners may not know about.
Yeah. First of all, people often think about Antalya as a resort city, seaside resort city, Mediterranean Sea, and so on, a lot of hotels. But one thing surprised me more about Antalya is I enjoy like super beautiful mountains out there. And the second thing is there are a lot of ancient Greek ruins with awesome amphitheaters and so on. And like sometimes you can go you may have a hike here in mountains and then found an amphitheater for 5,000 people. It's super impressive, and I didn't expect. I've been there before we moved here. I've been there a few times as a tourist, but I have never considered Antalya from this point of view.
Wow, cool. I mean, that sounds great. So sounds like a great hiking spot too, which I'm sure Peter would love. But
yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for having both of you on and discussing Coroot project with us, and best of luck. And I'm sure hopefully we'll cross paths at if not Antalya or some open source conferences in the near future. Thank you.
Yeah,
sounds great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye then.